stories that is being scripted even as we speak is the UK-India narrative around healthcare. I think the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is a great example of how UK and India working together is creating global solutions for global problems and issues that face all of humanity. And we are particularly glad, Dr. Siotia, for your time today to, I know how incredibly busy you are in your professional life, but we are absolutely delighted to have someone with us who himself kind of lives the UK-India relationship at every day in the healthcare sector. Dr. Siotia is currently the Director of Interventional Cardiology at BM Birla Heart Research Center in Calcutta. He was previously the Specialist Registrar in Cardiology, part of the NHS Trust at the University of Sheffield. He has his degrees in medicine are from India, from the UK and the USA, and Dr. Siotia has spent over 15 years in the UK studying and working in the medical domain there. He has recently come back to India, but also sort of shares his professional and personal time between UK and India. So welcome, Dr. Siotia, and over to you. Please take us through the healthy heart session that we have lined up for colleagues across India. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Devanjan. Thank you for the lovely introduction. So yes, today's talk is about heart attacks and how to prevent heart attack. So what I will do is I'll first I've got a small not so small presentation, but I'll whiz through these slides, which hopefully will give the audience an idea about what a heart attack is, what causes a heart attack, and how do we prevent a heart attack. So let me start this PowerPoint presentation if I can. I've opened it. Yeah. Can you all see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, Dr. Sir.
Yes, you can. Okay, great. So this is what I'm going to be talking about. All you need to know about heart attacks and its prevention. And these are the kind of objectives to understand what a heart attack is. Also, I've seen that there's a lot of confusion in the general public about what a heart attack is, what heart failure is, and what cardiac arrest is. So I'll briefly touch upon these things. They are entirely different things. Then we'll spend majority of our time talking about what the risk factors for developing a heart attack is and how one can reduce their own risk of having a heart attack. But before I start talking about heart attack, let me show you some images. And I'm sure most of the viewers would recognize this picture. This is from Las Vegas, the famous city. And the reason I'm showing a picture of Las Vegas is because Las Vegas has the distinction of having the most unhealthy restaurant in the world. And this is a picture of that restaurant. It's called the Heart Attack Grill, believe it or not. It's a burger joint and it is called the Heart Attack Grill. And this is what the entrance looks like. And if you look closely on the left bottom corner, you can see an ambulance there. Okay, because the owners of the restaurant felt that there's a possibility that people eating there can have a heart attack while they are having their food. So they are ready for a backup with an ambulance. And this is what the menu of this restaurant look like. It's called Heart Attack Grill and it sells burger. And these burgers are called single bypass burger, double bypass burger, and on and on and on. This is what they look like, the burgers.
Anas, dekho, Ayan, dekho.
This is a waitress dressed as a nurse, ready to serve the customers. And the manager dressed as a doctor. And this is what the typical customer visiting this restaurant looks like. And the quadruple bypass burger is in the Guinness Book of World Record because a single burger weighs almost 1.5 kilos and has almost 10,000 calories, making it the world's most calorific burger. So if you eat one burger, then you probably won't have to eat for the next 4 or 5 days. So that's just some interesting images. Let's talk about heart attacks now. A heart attack is an event that occurs when an artery supplying the heart with blood gets blocked. So our heart is basically a bag of muscles, and this bag of muscles, it needs nutrition all the time. It needs oxygen, it needs glucose, and that nutrition is provided to the heart muscle via these arteries that carry blood to the heart. And as we grow older, some of us will have cholesterol deposited in the arteries over time. And these cholesterol deposits in our arteries are called plaques. We call it plaques. And these plaques, they grow very, very gradually. So some people even think that this process of deposition of cholesterol in the arteries start at a very young age, even during their teen years. And then it gradually progresses. And over next 20, 30, 40 years, these plaques gradually block the artery. Now, this gradual process does not cause any damage to the heart muscles or does not pose any risk to a patient's life. But then one fine day, and it happens without any warning, without any definitive reason, one fine day, this plaque ruptures and a blood clot forms inside the plaque, completely occluding the artery. So I'll show you some pictures. So this is on the left hand side, the first picture, a picture of a normal artery. This is a normal artery, and then gradually a plaque is beginning to get deposited here. Over 10, 20, 30 years, the plaque becomes big, the yellow thing, and this narrows the artery. So if the lumen of the artery was previously this big, after 10, 20, 30 years, it becomes small like this. And then one fine day, suddenly a blood clot forms inside the plaque, completely blocking the artery, 100% occlusion. And that then leads to the heart attack. Okay, so this is what a heart attack is, when there is complete cessation of blood supply to a part of heart. And we will talk about the symptoms and everything later on. Lot of people confuse heart attack with heart failure and cardiac arrest. In fact, to give you an example, when Saurav Ganguly had his heart attack, one of the prominent politicians of our country tweeted that Saurav Ganguly has had a minor cardiac arrest, which of course was wrong, because cardiac arrest is not major or minor. Cardiac arrest is cardiac arrest, which is different from heart attack. So what is cardiac arrest? So cardiac arrest is an event when the heart stops beating completely, which means death, basically. So cardiac arrest means death unless a patient can be successfully revived from it. So you can give cardiopulmonary resuscitation or CPR, and sometimes it may be successful in certain cases, but usually cardiac arrest means death, and that death can occur due to any reason. It can happen due to a heart attack. It can happen in a cancer patient eventually, or it can happen after a road traffic accident. So cardiac arrest means death, but a heart attack is different. Heart attack can lead to death in some cases, but a lot of patients survive. And the third terminology with which patients get confused is heart failure. Heart failure is a condition when the heart becomes weak, and people with this condition can live for years. So if you have a heart attack, your heart is damaged, and then you can develop heart failure later on. So heart failure is a disease. It does not mean heart attack, and it also does not mean cardiac arrest, which is completely different. So why is heart attack so dangerous? Why is everybody scared of heart attack? And the reason is because heart attacks kill. I am going to show you lots of graphs, but whatever is shown in the graph is also written at the top. So you don't have to actually read the graph in detail. But what this graph shows is almost 50% of patients who have a heart attack will die within 4 weeks of a heart attack without any treatment. And that's true for any age group. So whether you are 35 years old or 50 years old, by and large, 50% of patients will die within a month of heart attack without any treatment. And this is the most important bit. This slide shows the time when people with heart attack die. So those with heart attack who are destined to die, This slide shows that almost 2/3, which means people in this black bar, almost 2/3 of patients, and this individual bar is data from an individual country, like this is Australia, this is Canada, Denmark, all European and Western countries. And this data shows that wherever you live, if you have a heart attack, then almost 2/3 of patients who die from a heart attack, they die before they reach hospital. So they die pre-hospital. So this is what the most important thing about heart attack is, that heart attack does not give you time. If you are destined to die from heart attack, you will die before you see a doctor, before you reach a hospital. After that, almost 15% of patients, they die within the first 24 hours, and another 15% or so will die within the first 1 month. But two-third will die before they see a doctor, which means that if you want to treat a heart attack, the best way actually is to prevent it. Because if you get it, then your risk of dying from it is very, very high. So then the question is, how do you prevent heart attack? How do you prevent getting a heart attack? And if you want to prevent getting a heart attack, you need to know what causes a heart attack or what the risk factors for developing a heart attacks are. So these are the risk factors. And I have divided the risk factors into two categories: non-modifiable and modifiable. Non-modifiable means you can't change it, you just have to live with it, which is like age, gender, family history and ethnicity. And modifiable risk factors, which are the important ones, which you can change, which you can do something about to try and reduce your cardiac risk. And they are smoking, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, alcohol, lack of exercise, obesity, and stress. And for the next 15 minutes, 10 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking about each and every of these individual risk factors. And then that will give you an idea about how you can reduce your own risk of having a heart attack. So age is a non-modifiable risk factor. You can't do anything about it. All of us are getting old all the time. And as we grow older, our risk of getting a heart attack increases. So the risk at 60 years will be higher than at 30 years, and risk at 80 will be higher at 60. But again, you can't do anything about it. Gender is important. Again, you can't change your sex, but one should know that men are at a higher risk of having heart attacks than women. So female hormones kind of give a protection to females, especially till about 45, 50 years of age. But after that, their risk also gradually increases. And by the time they are 60, 70, it is the same as a men, as males. But by and large, females have a lower risk of heart attack than men. And this graph beautifully shows it. The red line is the death due to cardiac heart attacks in females, and the black is in male. And these are lines from various countries, and you will see that wherever you live, females have a lower risk compared to men. Next is family history. So if you have somebody in your family who has had a heart attack, your parents or your brothers or sisters, then your risk is also high. So that means genetic causes. So bad family history is bad for you. And last but not the least, ethnic origin. So ethnic origin is very important because, you know, most of us Indians have a higher risk of having a cardiac illness compared to, say, a British population. But again, these four risk factors, as I call it, are non-modifiable. So you can't change your sex, or you can't change your genes, or you can't change the fact that you are of Indian origin. So these are non-modifiable, and we won't spend too much of time on it. Okay. The important ones are the changeable or the modifiable risk factors. And these risk factors you can do something about and work on it to reduce your risk of having a heart attack. And the most important of these modifiable risk factors is smoking. So if you smoke, your risk of heart attack increases significantly, 2 to 3 times. And if you smoke more than 40 cigarettes a day, then your risk is 10 times. And this is the graph that shows how your risk goes up depending upon the number of cigarettes you smoke. So if you smoke 11 to 15 cigarettes, your risk is maybe 3 times. If you smoke 40, your risk is 8 times. And you know, all the data, all the research is done on smoking, but basically, as I understand, tobacco in any form has the same, you know, adverse effect, whether it is smoking or jarda or gutka or kheni, because tobacco is consumed in our country in various different forms. And if you stop consuming tobacco in whatever form you are consuming, then your risk can be reduced to almost 50% within a year, and it can go down to that of a non-smoker within 15 years. So it always, a lot of patients come to me and they tell me that, oh doc, I know I've smoked all my life. What's the benefit of quitting now? That's not correct. Whatever, however long you may have smoked, it's always beneficial to stop smoking, stop consuming tobacco. Next risk factor is cholesterol. Again, most of you know this. In fact, I would say most of you know everything I will talk about today, but all I have done is compiled all the data in one presentation. So all of you know that high cholesterol is bad. As your cholesterol rises, your risk of having a heart attack increases. Okay, and some scientific data, a lot of data I am putting in my presentation just to emphasize the point. Whatever I am saying is not my creation or not my opinion, but it's backed by scientific data. And this is this study which was published in one of the most reputable journals in medicine called New England Journal of Medicine, which showed that if you take cholesterol lowering medicines called statins, then by taking a simple statin tablet, you can reduce your cholesterol by 50%, which then reduces your cardiac risk by 44%. So there was this study. So I thought I'll just show the data to you. But then the problem with cholesterol treatment sometimes is how high is high? What is the right cholesterol level? And this is an example I'm just giving you. This is my lipid profile, total cholesterol 224, HDL of 45 and LDL of 160. And then the question is, do I need to take cholesterol lowering tablets? And that depends not just on what my total cholesterol or HDL, LDL is, but also on my overall risk. So for example, if I am 40, not diabetic, non-smoker, and I do not have any high blood pressure, then probably my cardiac risk is low and I don't need to take medications. But if I am 70 years old with other risk factors like smoking or diabetes or high blood pressure, then I should take a cholesterol lowering tablet. So to not confuse you any further, all I would like to say is don't just look at your lipid profile and say, oh my God, it's in the red. The level on the result says it should be less than 200 and I am 201, so I need to take a medicine. That's not correct. Whether you need to take a tablet for your cholesterol depends not just on your cholesterol level, but your other risk factors as well. So you must consult a cardiologist and then decide whether you need to take medicines or not. The next risk factor is diabetes. Again, all of you know this. Diabetes is a very, very strong risk factor for heart disease. Anybody who is diabetic, his risk of having a heart attack increases by 2 to 3 times. And if a diabetic gets a heart attack, their risk of dying from the heart attack is much higher than that of a non-diabetic, almost twice. Again, some data to kind of prove what I have just told you, that diabetics have a higher risk compared to non-diabetic. So then the question is, does strict diabetic control reduces your cardiac risk? The answer is probably no. Okay, so when we talk about risks of diabetes, we divide them into 2 categories. One is this category, which is called microvascular disease, kidney problem, nephropathy, eye problem, and nerve problem. And these problems can be reduced by good diabetic control. But the macrovascular or the cardiac complications of diabetes cannot significantly be reduced by controlling diabetes. Okay, now that is not to say that you should not control your diabetes. You should, because it gives you a lot of other benefit, but just to tell you that just controlling diabetes is not going to reduce your cardiac risk. In a diabetic patient, your cardiac risk can be controlled better, or your cardiac risk can be reduced better by controlling your blood pressure and cholesterol. Next risk factor is high blood pressure. Again, very, very common condition, probably the most common disease worldwide, high blood pressure. And when we as cardiologists talk about high blood pressure, we talk about the rule of halves, which means if all the blood pressure patients all across the planet are taken into consideration, half of them never get a diagnosis. So that means they never get their blood pressure checked. Of the half who diagnosed, take medications. And of that half who take medications, only half will have good blood pressure control over their lifetime. So that means if 100 people with high blood pressure on the planet are there, only 12 or 13 will have their blood pressure controlled on medications. We aim for a blood pressure of less than 140 by 90. Some people will say 130 by 85 these days. And this is what all of you should aim for. So if you want to reduce your cardiac risk, have your blood pressure checked occasionally, at least once a month, and make sure it's controlled. Otherwise, take medications. Next is alcohol. Again, it's slightly debatable topic whether alcohol is good or bad for heart. The truth is, as far as heart attacks are concerned, alcohol is not bad. In fact, alcohol may have some beneficial effect on your cardiac health, and small amounts of drink on a regular basis actually reduces your cardiac risk quite significantly. But I am not advocating alcohol as a means to reduce your cardiac risk, because alcohol has other harmful effect on your brain, on your liver, and on a lot of other things. So if you don't drink, don't start drinking thinking alcohol has beneficial effect on your heart. But if you already drink, then drink sensibly and drink moderately. Next is exercise. All of you know this. Exercise is good for heart. People who lead a sedentary life have a higher risk of heart attack than people who exercise. And half an hour of brisk walk, at least 5 days a week, will reduce your cardiac risk significantly by almost 50%. So in summary, drink moderately and exercise regularly. The other risk factor is obesity, which is defined as an abnormal accumulation of body fat more than 20% over an individual's ideal body weight. Many of you will know this. There is a formula called BMI, or body mass index, which we use in medicine to calculate whether somebody is obese or not. And you can easily find out your own BMI on your smartphones. If you Google it, you can put your weight and your height and it will tell you what your BMI is. An ideal BMI is between 19 and 25. If you are over 25, you are overweight. If you are over 30, you are obese. Less than 19 is underweight. There are lots of possible reasons for obesity, but in general, I think if you are obese, then you are probably consuming more calories than you are spending. And it is not a very difficult thing to do, because a lot of us, including me, we don't have much idea about how much calories are there in the food that we eat. And this is just to give you an example. If we consume 100 extra calories every day, it will lead to a consumption of 365,000, 3,65,000 calories in a year, which will lead to 6 kg of weight gain in a year. And how much is 100 calorie? 100 calories is just one banana, or a glass of milk, or a slice of cheese, or a tablespoon of butter. That is 100 calories. So then the obvious question is, how much calories should we consume? How much is too much? And again, there is no kind of easy answer to that. It depends on how much exercise you are doing, how much you are spending. So it depends on how much you spend. So if you are an athlete, if you play tennis like Devanjan, then your intake can be much higher than somebody who is sitting at a table or at home all the time doing nothing. These are the risk factors associated with obesity. Obesity, in addition to heart problem, can do a lot of other things as well. Diabetes, high pressure, high cholesterol, brain stroke, arthritis, blah, blah, blah. Not getting into all that. But if you are obese, you should definitely aim for a steady weight loss to reduce your cardiac risk. Aim for 6 months of weight loss effort, after which start maintenance. And that will reduce your cardiac risk significantly. Surgery, bariatric surgery, is only a last resort. And last but not the least, I think one of the most important risk factors in modern society is stress. Stress increases the risk of developing blockages in the heart artery, and also increases the risk of heart attacks. I am not an expert on stress management, but here is some advice about how you can deal with stress. One is eat healthy food. It is now scientifically proven that people who consume junk food are more likely to be stressed than people who eat healthy diet. Exercise regularly, because when you exercise, certain chemicals are released into the body called endorphins, and these endorphins help you to deal with stress. Stop smoking. A common myth among people is, oh, I am stressed, so I should smoke. That's not correct, because smoking will cause more stress rather than relieve it. Relax every day. So all of us work very hard, and it's important to kind of, at the end of the day, to do something to de-stress yourself. Okay, listen to music, watch TV, yoga, play with your kids, do something to reduce the stress. Reduce the causes of stress, not easily done. Set realistic goals and expectations in life. Everybody can't be Shah Rukh Khan or Virat Kohli. So have realistic expectations in life and assert yourself at your workplace. Learn to say no. You may lose your job, but at least you won't have a heart attack. Summarize, one need to control the modifiable risk factors to reduce their cardiac risk and stop smoking, cholesterol lowering medications if needed, diabetes management, BP control, regular exercise, alcohol in moderation, stress management, and managing your ideal body weight. And this is a very, very important slide. I'll show you the left one. This slide shows the individual effect of these modifiable risk factor and the cumulative effect of these modifiable risk factor. So, for example, if you smoke, your risk of having heart attack is 3 times that of a non-smoker. If you have diabetes, it's 2 to 3 times. High blood pressure, 2 times. But if you have 1, 2, and 3 combined, then your risk is 16 times. So these risk factors are not additive, they multiply. If you have all the 4 risk factors, if you have high cholesterol as well, your risk is 32 times. And if you have all the risk factors I showed, then your risk is 500 times that of somebody without any risk factors. And by addressing these individual risk factors, you can actually reduce your risk to very close to somebody without any risk factors. So to conclude, risk factors for heart attacks are well defined in medical literature, and I'm sure all of you knew this already. Many of them are modifiable if you have a little bit of willpower, and by adopting a healthy lifestyle and using drugs when needed, you can reduce your risk of having heart attacks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anjan. Am I audible to colleagues?
Yes.
I thank you so much, Anjan. I think questions have started to pour in. The first question we have is from my colleague Rashi Jain, Director North India. Is there a possibility? Okay, no, this is a question that's addressed to all of us. Yes, Rashid, we will be sharing the recording of this session. Let me see if there are other questions. Okay, my colleague Shonali Ganguly has a question. It is, if you are having BP medicines, how often does it need to change? Dr. Siotia, the first question from you is there. Can you see the chat box, Dr. Siotia?
Can't at the moment.
Okay, don't worry. I'll keep forwarding the questions to you. So the first question is about BP medicines. How often does it need to be changed?
Yeah, so it does not need to be changed at all if the blood pressure is well controlled. So if somebody has high blood pressure and somebody is taking medications for it and their blood pressure is well controlled on these medicines, then they don't need to be changed at all unless patient is getting side effects. So carry on with the medicines for forever. But if somebody develops side effects or their blood pressure is not adequately controlled on a certain drug, then these blood pressure medicines may need changing or a new drug may need adding to the existing medications.
There's a related question, Dr. Siotia. Once a BP medicine is started, can it be stopped if BP is under control?
Theoretically speaking, yes. Well, yes, if there is a reversible cause for high blood pressure. Let's say, for example, somebody's blood pressure was high because they were very obese and very stressed or whatever. And then they change their lifestyle, they lose a lot of weight, they work on their stress management, and their blood pressure starts to return to normal levels or below normal levels, then you can stop medications. But for most people who take BP medicines, they end up taking BP medicines for life, for most of us. So you can't stop it. It's like us wearing glasses. So we can't see very well with our eyes. That's why we are wearing glasses. When we wear glasses, we can see very well. That does not mean you stop wearing those glasses. So it's a bit same with BP medicines. You don't take BP medicines, your pressure will go up. You take it, it will come down to normal. That does not mean you should stop taking BP medicine. You should still continue to take it. Otherwise, it will again go back up again. So unless there is a reversible cause, you can't.
There's another question from my colleague Radhika Singh, which is, after an angioplasty, if a person is healthy and doing well, how often should he have a cardiac checkup, and what symptoms should we be on the lookout to identify any issue?
So yes, a very good question. I mean, I was going to talk about the symptoms of heart and symptoms of heart attack and what to do in the event of a heart attack, but I will talk about that later. But to come back to Radhika's question about checkup. So I think if a patient is absolutely fine without any symptoms, has had an angioplasty, then a once a year visit to a doctor is good enough. But if they develop any symptoms, any cardiac symptoms, and the cardiac symptoms are, typically chest pain on exertion. So the classical symptoms of a blockage in the heart is chest pain on exertion. So it's something called angina. When you walk or do something, you get a heaviness or a tightness in the chest, and you sit or you rest, and the tightness resolves. The heaviness resolves. It goes away in a few minutes. So this is a classical symptom of a cardiac illness. So if you get that, then of course you should go to the doctor immediately. Sometimes, especially in diabetic patients and females, and sometimes in old patient, they don't get chest pain, but they get breathlessness. So they have, because they're diabetic, they don't get any pain, but they get breathless when they walk and do something. And that can also be a sign of cardiac illness. But breathlessness is a very common symptoms, and it can have lots of many different causes like lung disease or low hemoglobin or just lack of fitness. But pain in the chest is very specific for heart.
Thanks, Anjan. There's a question from my colleague Anvesha Khandelwal. If cholesterol is slightly on the higher side, are medications still required to be taken, or diet and lifestyle changes can address that?
So as I said earlier, diet and exercise is always the first line management of high cholesterol and everything else, even if you have high cholesterol. But if you have kind of borderline range, you can wait and see. And my advice is to go to a cardiologist, and or sometimes you can do it yourself. If you Google something called ASCVD risk, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease risk. Okay, it will take you to something called a risk score. Okay, you can enter your data. It's very simple. It will just ask you a few questions: male, female, age, your total cholesterol, your HDL cholesterol, whether you have high pressure or not, whether you smoke or not, and then it will give you a number. This is your risk of having a heart problem in the next 10 years. And if that risk is low, it's less than 7.5%, then you don't need to take cholesterol medicine, whatever your lipid profile says. But if that number is high, then you need to take cholesterol medicine. So I use that risk score. It's called ASCVD risk score to decide if a patient of mine needs cholesterol medicine or not.
Thanks, Anjan. There's a question from my colleague Riddhima who asks, after 40, how often should we get a heart checkup in order to detect heart problems early?
Now, these are difficult questions to answer. You ask 10 different people and you get 20 different answers. What exactly one means by heart checkup also varies from doctor to doctor and country to country. Okay, so for example, in England, there is no such concept of healthy people going for a heart checkup. Whereas in India and also in America, where healthcare is mainly privatized, all the hospitals and diagnostic centers, they have kind of these health packages where, you go and you have your annual health checkup done. And even 20-year-olds go and get their checkups done. I must admit, being trained in England, I am not a great fan of these health checkup packages, especially in young people. After a certain age, after 40, as you asked, yes, blood tests are very, very important, especially your cholesterol and your blood sugar. So these are two very, very important tests that everybody must get from time to time, because these two things, they don't cause any symptoms, and you may be diabetic without knowing it, and similarly your cholesterol may be high without you knowing it. Lots of other blood tests, I don't know they are as important, but yes, there's no harm in getting your blood workup done at least once a year, and there's no problem with that. If you lead a very healthy life, so for example, somebody like you who is playing tennis and is very fit, who is running, I don't think there is much point in going and doing a treadmill test. Okay. That's my personal opinion. I may be right, I may be wrong. But if somebody leads a sedentary life and somebody has lots of risk factors, say for example, they have bad family history, they are diabetic, then yes, it makes sense to do a treadmill test done. And if that is normal, then to repeat it at regular interval. And that regular interval again can depend upon your risk profile. So in a low risk individual, maybe every 5 years, in a high risk individual, maybe every 2 years. If you are in a very high risk job like a pilot, then maybe every year. So that's something that can be done. I'm sure somebody will ask me this question, so I might preempt it and talk about it. Saurav Ganguly had this heart attack, and everybody is wondering how come such a fit person and very healthy person and somebody who is exercising all the time, lean and thin, no risk factors, how come someone like him got a heart attack, and how we could prevent it, how you could prevent that from happening to yourself. Okay, so first of all, the first part of the question, why did he get a heart attack without any risk factor? So as I showed in my presentation, that there are many different risk factors, the non-modifiable risk factors, genetic factors. So he maybe I don't know his genetic, his risk, but maybe he has a bad family history, and that is good.
His father did die of a heart attack. So
yeah. So maybe and also remember one thing, that these 7, 8, 9 risk factors I've shown you, they are risk factors. We as cardiologists, we deal with heart attacks almost on a daily basis. Okay. And we do see patients from time to time who do not have any risk factors and still have had a heart attack. Similarly, there are people who have very bad lifestyle, obese, sedentary life, smoke, drank, eat all sorts of food and live till 90. They don't get a heart attack. So having a risk factor only increases your risk. That does not mean you will necessarily have it. And lack of risk factor does not mean that you will not have a heart attack. So the bottom line is, as a doctor, and I tell this to all my patients, that it is impossible for us as medical professionals to reduce the risk of heart attack of an individual to 0%. So we can't prevent each and every heart attack in the world, whatever we do. But we can reduce the risk. And we can reduce the risk depending upon how high your risk is. So if you have multiple risk factors and your risk is very high, we can reduce it more significantly. Just by stopping smoking, it comes down to 50%. Then we can give you blood thinners, we can give you cholesterol medicines, we can ask you to exercise, we can control your blood pressure, your diabetes, and your risk will go down. But it will not go down to 0%. It will still be 1% or 2% or something like that. So there will always be some risk, but by adopting a healthy lifestyle, you can reduce it to as low as you can. And blood tests or undergoing health checkups can be a part of that healthy lifestyle. So you do the test to kind of find out where you stand, what your risk is. So you check your lipid profile when you do the test. And if it's high, is it so high that it needs medications? Or is it kind of something that can be managed on diet and exercise only? You check your blood pressure every month, make sure that's normal. You eat healthy, you exercise regularly, you consume alcohol in moderation. So you reduce your risk by doing that. Just doing blood test and doing treadmill test is not going to reduce your risk.
So you won't be prescribing alcohol as treatment per se?
I wish I could, but no, I'm not.
There's a slightly technical question beyond the joke. How safe are procedures like TAVR for valve replacement as they are relatively new? This comes from our colleague Ariba Talib.
Okay. So TAVR for those of you who don't know, it's called transcatheter aortic valve replacement. So it's got nothing to do with heart attacks. Basically, heart has got something called valves inside it. Okay, and these valves sometimes become dysfunctional as we grow older. So they don't open very well and they have to be replaced. And the only way, till a few years ago, the only way to replace those valves was to do an open heart surgery and put a new valve in. But sometimes people are too old and too unfit to have an open heart surgery. So nowadays we can fix a new valve from the leg, just like we do an angioplasty. Okay, and we go from the leg, go all the way to the heart and put a new valve in. And it is a phenomenally safe procedure. Okay, because it is done in people who are very high risk, who are not fit for surgery. So even in those very high risk individual, the success of TAVR is 99, almost 99%, and the risks are very, very low. So it's a fantastic procedure.
Thanks, Anjan. There's a question from my colleague Payal Dasgupta. If someone's heartbeat is very fast all the time, what kind of heart disease is it?
So a very broad question, Payal, if I have to say. Fast heartbeat can be due to a lot of conditions. So for example, if you have a thyroid problem, your heartbeat can be fast. If you are very unfit, your heart rate can be very fast. So your heart rate can be what we call fast normal. So the rhythm may be normal, but the heart rate is fast because you are unfit or you have a thyroid illness or your hemoglobin is low, so your heart rate can go up. So these are kind of what we call physiological causes of fast heart rate. But then there are some pathological problems like an abnormal cardiac rhythm that can cause fast heart rate as well. So to diagnose the cause of your fast heart rate, you need an ECG maybe and sometimes other tests like Holter. And it is a very, very broad subject with a very, very broad differential diagnosis. So lots of different causes can cause it. And I don't think I can cover it in this one lecture. But if somebody has this problem, they should consult a cardiologist, get an ECG, get some bloods, get a echocardiogram, maybe a Holter to find out what the cause is. And then depending upon the cause, it can be treated. Most such conditions can be treated with medications.
I think we are coming towards the end of our conversation. One last question, if there are no burning questions. This comes from our colleague Devashish Pradhan, which is sometimes we don't come to know what the heart attack is taking place. Probably a mild heart attack is taking place. The patient is diabetic and is under medication as the pumping of the heart is 35% less. Does the patient have to undergo operation?
So yeah, it's a very, very good question, and you know it kind of gives me an opportunity to tell your audience about you know what a heart attack is like and what the symptoms are because you have not discussed it. So this is very
What does it
important.
feel like?
Yeah. So heart attack, as I mentioned in my during my presentation, it occurs when a heart artery suddenly gets blocked. So when a heart artery suddenly gets blocked, a part of heart, a part of the heart muscles, it basically dies. It gets damaged, necrosed as we call it. And that causes certain symptoms. And the classical symptom is a severe central chest pain. So people get a pain in the center of the chest. It can go to the left side of the chest or to the right side, go to the back or to the upper abdomen. It can go to the shoulders, both shoulders, to the jaw, to the left arm. So these are the common sites where the pain can radiate to. But the pain is the classical symptom. It is usually described as the worst pain of their life. So it's a very severe pain, worst pain in the center of the chest. It may be associated with nausea, vomiting, sweating, and a feeling of impending doom. People think that, you know, they are going to die. That kind of a pain. It's that bad. So this is what a typical heart attack pain is like. But not everybody gets these typical symptoms. These are like textbook description of heart attack, and not everybody gets it, as you rightly said. So a lot of patients have atypical symptoms. In India, almost half of the patients who come to me with heart attack tell me, oh, they have gas, indigestion. So everybody, thinks that the heart attack is actually a gas problem because their symptoms are in the lower chest, upper abdomen. They think they have eaten something bad the previous meal, and that's causing this indigestion. So some people perceive it as gas problem. Sometimes the pain is absent, as you rightly said, it may be especially in diabetic patients, in females, and they don't get any pain. They can just present with breathlessness or feeling weak, and we do the test and we find out. So my advice to all of you is, if you suspect that whatever symptoms you are having could be cardiac, then don't waste time, because as I have shown very clearly, 2/3 of all heart attack related deaths occur before a patient reaches hospital. So immediately take the patient to a cardiac center, a place where the cardiac team is equipped to deal with a heart attack, and get an ECG done at least. If the ECG is normal, if patient is low risk, bring the patient back home. But if there's any abnormality, then admit the patient. And if it is a frank heart attack, then the best treatment is to unblock that artery. And you can accomplish that unblocking of the artery by doing something called an angioplasty, which should be done immediately within 12 hours. The sooner you do it, the better it is. So that is, in a nutshell, the treatment of the symptoms of heart attack and the immediate treatment. Okay, coming back to the question, what else can be done if the ejection fraction is 35% or something? Again, it varies from person to person. Every patient is different. Initially, the treatment is, as I said, open the artery, blocked artery, and depending upon when you do that procedure, the heart function may improve to some extent. And then these patients with a weak heart, this condition called heart failure, they have to be on medicine, certain specific drugs for the rest of their life that can help. And last but not the least, there are certain very specialized pacemakers that we can implant that can further increase their heart function.
DC, Dr. Siotia, there is one very important question. DC, you're on mute. We can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself? If not, I'll just ask this on behalf of my colleague Ridhima. She is asking, in what event should we administer a sorbitrate? Now, this is something that all of us want to know, particularly with elderly people in the house.
Yes.
Thank you.
So anybody with a chest pain, because you don't know whether a chest pain is cardiac or non-cardiac. So if somebody is having severe chest pain, then it is okay to put a sorbitrate under the tongue. If you suspect somebody of having a heart attack, then also you can give that patient a Disprin tablet to chew. Again, for a non-medico and sometimes even for a medical doctor, it is difficult to diagnose a heart attack on the basis of history only. Okay, we have to depend on tests like ECG and blood tests to diagnose a heart attack. But just a suspicion of a heart attack is good enough for you to give a patient a Disprin tablet to chew and a sorbitrate under the tongue, and they will help.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Siotia, for that. And thank you, Radhika, for stepping in. My unmute button had frozen. Thank you, Dr. Siotia, from the British Council and from all of us here. And I think there are lots of comments coming in thanking you for this. We might have a few other questions, which if you agree, Dr. Siotia, we will email you and you could just send us a collective response to those questions. And thank you, colleagues from across the network, for taking some time off to listen to this conversation on a healthy heart. And thank you once again, Dr. Siotia and the CK Birla Group of Hospitals for joining us and giving us this insight into a healthier lifestyle.
Thank you, Devanjan. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.